as we move through this. Anyway, just in case anyone is online watching. Thank you for attending today's block grant hearing. The purpose of the hearing is to receive public comments on the use of 5 human services block grants that Georgia receives from the federal government. The hearing, the hearing also provides the members of the Georgia legislature the opportunity to listen to the views of private citizens and other interested parties on how block grant funds should be used for state fiscal year 2015, which will begin July 1, 2014. These block grants are Community Mental Health Block Grant, Community Services Block Grant, Low Income Home Energy Assistance Block Grant, Social Services Block Grant, Substance Abuse Prevention and Treatment Block Grant. Public input is an important aspect of the deliberative process that the Georgia legislature undertakes in making decisions about the state's budget. Thank you for taking the time to participate in this process. At this time, R. Demetrius Taylor will provide a brief summary of the grants and explain how we will proceed. Please welcome Mr. Taylor.
Thank you, Representative Katie Dempsey. As Representative Dempsey has told you, the Department of Human Services have received public comments on 3 federal block grants today. By federal law, Georgia is required to hold public hearings on these grants. These 3 grants are the Community Services Block Grant, Low Income Home Energy Assistance Block Grant, and the Social Services Block Grant. At this time, I will give you a brief overview of these grants. The Community Services Block Grant provides funds for services and activities that impact the causes of poverty and to assist low-income participants. These funds are distributed to local agencies throughout the state and fund a wide range of services, including employment, education, nutritional services, meal services, as well as housing services. The Low Income Home Energy Assistance Block Grant provides cash assistance to qualified low-income households for home energy costs, weatherization costs such as installation, caulking, weather stripping, to reduce energy consumption and for energy crisis intervention. Finally, the Social Services Block Grant funds various services such as daycare services for children, adults and persons with mental retardation, home delivered meals, homemaker services, transportation, and protective services for adults and children. This grant also assists families to achieve and or maintain economic support and self-sufficiency. At this time, Lee Wright, the Director of Budget and Finance for the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Disabilities, will provide a list and a brief summary of his agency grants.
Thank you, Demetrius. The Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Disabilities will receive public comments on 2 federal block grants today. These 2 grants are the Community Mental Health Services Block Grant and the Substance Abuse Prevention and Treatment Block Grant. Here's a brief overview of each grant. The Community Mental Health Services Block Grant implements the provisions of the Mental Health State Plan by providing services to individuals with a serious mental illness and to children with a serious emotional disturbance. The Substance Abuse Prevention and Treatment Block Grant provides funds for community-based alcohol and drug treatment, prevention, and early intervention programs. Thank you. Now I'll turn it back over to Demetrius to continue in the proceeding.
Thank you, Lee. More details about each of these grants, including types of programs that can be funded and their proposed funding levels, are included in the color-coded pamphlets that are available on the table outside. There is a separate pamphlet on each grant. Before receiving your comments, let me go over a few ground rules. We will take speakers in the order in which they signed up to speak. If you have not signed up yet, you may do so outside. Please give us your name and the name of the organization in which you work for. If you have 1 or more speakers within the same organization, we ask that you elect one to speak for that organization. By doing this, we will ensure that each organization and citizen gets a fair chance to comment. You will be given 5 minutes to present your comments. There is a timekeeper who will let you know when you have 1 minute left. I will initially call 2 speakers to the podium at a time. As the first person is speaking, the next person should make his or her way to the podium. Then I will call your name. Please make your way to the podium. If you have written comments for the record or for a copy of your speech, please place these on the table at the end of the meeting. Now let's begin. Vicki Johnson, she's with the Georgia Council on Aging, and then we have Jenny Helms with Alzheimer's Association.
Thank you for this opportunity to testify. I am Vicki Johnson, Legislative Chair for the Georgia Council on Aging and an advocate for Georgia's seniors. The Council, in its advisory capacity to the state government, wishes to address the allocation of Social Services Block Grant, SSBG, funding for seniors. SSBG monies are allocated to local communities through contracts administered by the Division of Aging Services to provide services that enable older Georgians to continue living at home. Services such as home-delivered meals, homemaker assistance, adult daycare, caregiver respite care, and transportation can often delay or completely prevent costly nursing home placement. SSBG funds are also used to assist adults who are leaving institutional care to return to their communities under the federal Money Follows the Person program. At a time such as now, when elder abuse is on the rise, SSBG monies can go toward expanding the work of adult protective services in their investigations, with a heightened and welcome focus from law enforcement on bringing abuse, neglect, and exploitation cases to prosecution. SSBG funding can make a significant difference in protecting vulnerable seniors. These funds can also enhance the protection afforded to residents of long-term care facilities through the state's Long-Term Care Ombudsman program. We see 3 ways, then, seniors can benefit from SSBG funds: home and community-based services, more investigation of elder abuse, and enhanced protection of long-term care residents. Georgia's older population is the fastest growing segment in the state, increasing by 45% in the last decade, compared to 18% for the state as a whole and 15% for children under age 19. Yet the share of SSBG funding for aging services has remained unchanged in recent years. It is our hope that you, as legislators, will review the data on these shifting demographics and take action to modify the SSBG allocation to aging services to better reflect the growth in the older population. One way this might be accomplished is to use state funding for Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Disabilities waivered services, which can leverage Medicaid funds. Rather than leaving that federal money on the table, we can use state funding in a strategic way and reserve SSBG funds to address the needs of those served by the Division of Aging Services. Thank you.
I'm Jenny Helms with the Alzheimer's Association, and I'd like to thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee, for this opportunity to talk to you about the needs of people with Alzheimer's. And I particularly want to tell you about the kind of cases and situations that we see and help families with on a daily basis there at the Alzheimer's Association. And we estimate that there are about 120,000 Georgians with Alzheimer's disease, and that 70% live in their homes. And we estimate that 37% of these live alone. And we think that people who have early stage and live alone can do so safely as long as there's someone to make sure that they eat, to make sure that they get their medications, and that they monitor their health. And so because of this, we think that Meals on Wheels is a vital component of the safety and well-being of these people with early stage. And we think if they can get these meals at home, it can help prevent what we call early placement. Now, we totally respect long-term care, and we want to see it available for people when they need it, but we want to do all we can to help them stay in their homes if that's what they want to do and can do so safely. We also know that as they progress in the disease, that they're going to need help with cooking, bathing, toileting, eating, and all of these different things, and that the average length of the disease lasts about 8 to 10 years, and so these caregivers do get worn out. And if we can give them just some respite, we can delay nursing home placement by about 2 years. And so we think that the respite is actually an affordable alternative for long-term care while they're at that appropriate stage. And sadly, we're hearing daily about vulnerable people with dementia being abused or exploited. In one recent case, a family member called me and said that he was very concerned because his father had Alzheimer's. He was cared for at home by this fellow's nephew who had a history of drug abuse, and that things like Rolex watches were going missing, and he was concerned not just about financial abuse, but physical abuse as well. A couple months go by, we get a call from that same family member, and that elderly person with dementia had ended up in the hospital, and there was a report of elder abuse that the nurse confirmed. And I got a copy of the police report and was very concerned also that because this person who was arrested was taken to jail, his mother went and bailed him out and took him back to the home of the person with Alzheimer's. And so in this case, we really do reach out to Adult Protective Services and say, we need your help. And unfortunately, these cases are happening more and more often, and so we want to make sure that APS is adequately funded. And in addition to the abuse that we're hearing, that's the financial abuse that we hear most often, I think we're all also hearing about these cases where people end up in unlicensed personal care homes, and that again is about the money. That's them going after the different income streams that those elderly people have. And so we're also told that we really do need funding for emergency placement for these folks. We had that case up in Commerce that everybody heard about, and I think the state did a beautiful job on that, but I think we all know that we need systems in place and adequate funding to move them promptly, because as Vernon Keenan, director of the GBI, has said, I think we've only seen the tip of the iceberg there. And so we need to make sure that we have adequate funding for this emergency placement. Also, at the Alzheimer's Association, we train over 2,000 law enforcement officers a year on how to find people when they go missing, and we assist in these cases. And sometimes it's helping the GBI or the family figure out where the person might have gone. Sometimes it's getting backup dogs. When a dog canine team gets overheated and they're calling off the search, we keep it going. We do everything we can to help find that person and keep them safe. But the police are telling us over and over that they're very frustrated because they don't have emergency placement. And so then the other thing is we're seeing cases right and left where we need ombudsman. Just today, yesterday and today, we've been working on a case where a woman in a nursing home had combative behavior. She'd had falls. They said to the family, you've got to have 24-hour care, and you've got to, at one point, move her out. Well, with all of these falls and moving out and it getting costly, this guy brings in his own medications and drugs her for pain and with Xanax without telling anybody. We need ombudsman to come in there and work on that case and keep her safe. And so we reached out to them, and they really are wonderful. So what I'm saying is these cases are real. There are a lot of people who need the help, and we're asking that you give funding for these vulnerable persons on par with the other populations. Thank you.
Next, we have Catherine Lawler from Atlanta Regional Commission. Then up next would be Cindy Nelson from the Senior Citizen Advocacy Program.
Good afternoon. It's my great pleasure to be here with you. My name is Catherine Lawler. I'm the director of the Area Agency on Aging for the Atlanta Metro region. I'm also, our organization is a member of G4A, the Georgia Association of Area Agencies on Aging. As the Area Agency on Aging for the Metro Atlanta area, we are charged with understanding and planning for the population in the 10-county metro area, the older adult population. It's our task to both serve the immediate needs but think about the future as well. And as a result, we focus on the needs of about a third of the state's older adult population. And I really want to support what both Ginny and Vicki have shared with you today. It is about the state of Georgia's increasing need to put emphasis on the needs of older adults. And it's for all of the reasons they already suggested, and a couple others I would like to share with you. You know the numbers, you've seen the demographics, but I think the numbers are so remarkable, it's worth saying them out loud. Just the fact that over the last 2 years, we've had an additional 130,000 older adults in the state of Georgia. It's the fastest growing population in the state of Georgia. By 2030, we expect 30 million older adults to be living in Georgia. This is an absolutely predictable trend. We've known it's coming for a long time. These are numbers we have been staring down. But unfortunately, in Georgia, we haven't been taking the necessary steps to prepare. And that's what I'm asking you to do now when thinking about allocating these block grant funds, is make the investments now to build the infrastructure to meet the needs of our older citizens. Not only are we looking at a growth in the older adult population, but tremendous growth in what you might consider as vulnerable older adults. In just the Atlanta region alone, between 2007 and 2012, older adults living in poverty have increased by 45%. Older adults living alone, who might be at risk of a number of things, have increased by 30%. So we're looking at all kinds of growth, but growth of people that when they can get the help they need, they can live in the community much longer than possible, than might have been possible otherwise. At this same time, during this period of incredible growth, all of Georgia has taken cuts. All of the department has taken cuts. But I have to raise with you today that in the Department of Human Services, the Division on Aging is only 3% of the department's budget. Yet in FY13, the amended budget, the Aging Division bore 43% of the cuts for the entire department. And in FY14, the Aging Division, again, only 3% of the entire department, bore 57% of the entire total cuts for DHS. So just at the time we need to be investing in services and infrastructure, we have actually been rapidly decreasing the funds available to serve older adults. This is not only eroding our infrastructure, it absolutely eliminates the possibility of doing the kind of preventive services which keep people healthier longer. Block grants are a unique source of funding because they provide the kind of flexibility to innovate. And innovation is exactly what we need now. We are radically reinventing what it means to grow old in America and in Georgia, and services need to keep up with that by being innovative, cost-effective, and these type of funds are exactly designed to do that, to allow communities to do what they do best, which is respond to those local needs and rebalance our long-term care system. We've seen over and over again that aging services are able to leverage community support when they have that small seed of the federal and state funding. And as you grow that seed, as I'm confident you'll do by looking at these block grant funds, you'll continue to see that local communities match that money. In the metro region, we do that $2 for every single federal and state dollar. The local communities are providing $2 of additional match. So thank you for your time today. Again, I want to support what others have said. This is a critical population, but it's just smart to invest now before the growth becomes overwhelming.
Good afternoon, and thank you for allowing me to testify this afternoon. I'm Cindy Nelson. I am the Senior Citizen Advocacy Program person. I represent the Georgia Area Agencies on Aging, tried to say that real fast, Area Agencies on Aging, and the Georgia Gerontology Society. So many Georgian seniors are really in dire straits today. The Economic Policy Institute reported that 11% of Georgia seniors live in poverty. That is higher than a rate of 41 other states in the Union. So in 2010, Georgia ranked in the top 10 for senior hunger. Senior hunger is food insecurity and where people are afraid that they don't have enough food or where their next meal is coming from. 4 years ago, 17% of Georgia seniors were threatened with this food insecurity. And we know that during this time, between 4 years ago and now, that we've had an increase in the population of seniors and a decrease in the amount of funding. So we can only imagine that that percentage of seniors with food insecurity has increased, although we don't have the reported metrics. The Georgia Area Agencies on Aging will be reducing the number of meals delivered to the seniors by over 100,000 during the next year because of the cuts and the increases in population. The funding for seniors continues to shrink while the population continues to grow. As has been said, Georgia has the 4th fastest growing population of seniors in the U.S. Many of the senior centers across the state are having to reduce the number of days that they provide congregate or delivered meals to seniors down to 4 days per week. So what this means is on Fridays at many senior centers, there's no congregate meals, and also there's no food delivery on Fridays. So our seniors really have no personal interaction a lot of times on that day, and they don't have a hot meal. The consequences of reducing the meal delivery and nutrition services can be alarming for us. We know that that equates to more emergency room visits, a higher population having to go into a skilled nursing facility at a higher cost to the state taxpayers. And Georgia seniors are proud and they're independent. They don't want to be in a skilled nursing facility. They want to be at home and they want to be able to take care of themselves. And sometimes by just providing one hot meal a day, we can allow people to stay at home and to continue to be a member of the community and pay taxes and also buy food from the grocery store or use other services which create jobs. There are currently over 6,000 Georgia seniors on a wait list to get nutritional supplement on a daily basis. And that's the Meals on Wheels, home delivery, or congregate meals. So I don't know about you, but when I think about that, 6,000 people waiting to get food and worrying about being hungry, it really breaks my heart. And I hope that you take that to heart as you're looking at how to spend this money. And these are not slackers. These are, our grandparents, our aunts, uncles. These are people that have worked to make Georgia the state that we live in today and that we're very proud of. At one time in our life, all of us relied on them, and now they're relying on us. I hope we do them proud. Thank you very much.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak? If so, please approach the podium and state your name and the name of the organization in which you represent. All right, with that said, I'd like to thank each of you for attending today's hearing. I personally like to thank the panel, Representative Dempsey, Michael Parkinson from House Budget Office, Chairman Utterman, and Amy Hodge from Senate Budget Office. Now I turn it back over to Representative Katie Dempsey.
Thank you. Senator Unterman, would you like to say anything? Well, I just want to say thank you before we conclude for the services that many of you provide and the organizations that you represent. We appreciate you and appreciate you being here today to help us understand your stories a little bit better. This will conclude the block hearings, the block grant hearings. Thank you.
Well, you want? Yeah, go ahead and say it. Yeah, you go ahead and do it. Since it works for you.
Welcome back, everybody. Just a quick note, Chair Lady Houston is feeling under the weather. This fall, DOT falls under her subcommittee, so I've asked her to go home and get feeling good so she'll be ready to work for tomorrow. But I'm going to hand off the gavel to my esteemed chairman, colleague in the Senate, Senator Hill, to run the last portion of the meeting. Thank you.
He was fighting everything he could to keep from saying old friend. Commissioner Golan, we're glad to see you. Thank you. And launch out. Senator, turn you on.
All right. Thank you both, Chairman England and Chairman Hill. I want to first recognize some of our DOT board members that are with us today, and I won't go by name, but we have quite a few that came out with support. We think we're going to have a vote at the end, so we brought our numbers. And I also want to do a quick introduction of our staff, which is we have Angela Whitworth, who's our treasurer, Russell McMurray, who's our chief engineer, Todd Long's deputy commissioner, Toby Carr is the planning director appointed by the governor, as you know, and Josh Waller. So we're here to answer any of your questions today. I want to start off talking about the DOT staffing and make sure that you guys kind of know where we've been trending. As you can tell from back in 1972, we had about 9,110 employees, and we had about 35,000 lane miles at the time that we managed. Today, you jump forward to about 2014, we're at 4,170 employees, and we have about 47,000 lane miles to maintain. So the system's getting bigger, our staffing's getting smaller. So Todd kind of coined this phrase in our organization, and we continue to kind of use it, but we're not trying to be necessarily efficient anymore. We need to be effective at what we do. And so we're really focused on doing that as an organization. Many of you know we've closed some of our area offices. to make our streamlined processes in our areas management structure a little bit smaller because of our smaller staff. State motor fuel collections, as many of you know, we're going to start off with the 2014 amended numbers. The audited number came in a little over $1.2 billion, and that's actually up from the actual governor's estimate of $975 million. So we'll be talking about amending those dollars into our budget today. We always like to highlight debt service. This is probably the biggest challenge the Department of Transportation faces today. Debt service for us is made up of our state motor fuel and our federal program. And you can see in FY14, we have about $401 million worth of debt service. That's made up of three real components. One is which is called the general obligation debt services, debt service, which is in blue. The $44 million is the GRB bonds, or the general revenue bonds. And then the yellow number is what's called the grant anticipation revenue vehicle. I can never say, I say GARB, but for short. But that's the federal portion of the program. And as you can see, that number continues to be a significant struggle for the Department of Transportation. We do not receive any major debt reduction until around 2019, when that number goes down to about $60 million. Goes down $60 million to about $370 million. So starting in our 14 amended budget recommendation request, it's based on a little over $1.2 billion, $1 billion, $2 million number. And I'm going to start you in the right-hand corner with the red, the GO bond debt service and the SRTA debt service. Those are the two pieces of the pie that make up our big portion of debt service. SRTA is the payment for our debt service for both our GARB bonds. That's a significant portion of our budget. This year, it's roughly 25% of our state motor fuel. Coming around to the next number, you see in the left-hand corner, the yellow, the kind of orange color is the maintenance number. That's our amended budget request recommendation, which is a little over $202 million. And that is our routine maintenance activities that we do, mowing grass, keeping welcome centers and rest areas clean. And then you come down to the blue part, which is our general operations fund of $164 million. And that's where our design services, right-of-way acquisition, all the things we do for pre-construction activities, planning activities, and reporting activities comes from. And then the purple piece is, we'll spend a little bit more time today on the purple piece than we normally do, but the capital project's $273 million. And that's what really goes to match our capital construction and capital maintenance programs. That's the state match to the federal program. And we're going to spend a little bit of time towards the end of the day kind of making sure you're clear on what the federal program is and isn't, and some of the challenges we're going to have in 2014 and 2015. Our 2014 budget recommendation for motor fuel redistribution, we recommended, and the governor has gone along with, local roads admin, a $7.5 million reduction in local roads admin. We've asked for this for several years in a row because several years ago, staff was moved up to construction administration program, but the funds were not moved to that. So this is just a kind of an alignment of our staffing where those employees have been moved to another program, and we've asked for this for several years. So we've asked that to be redistributed to our routine maintenance program, which is where we continue to try to have to find funding for service contracts. Planning, we asked for a $1.5 million redistribution. Several years ago, we stopped matching the metropolitan planning organizations. If you're not familiar, we have about 16 MPOs in Georgia. And what happens is the federal government gives 80% of the funds for planning purposes. The state used to provide a 10% match, and then the locals were responsible for 10% match. We stopped matching that 10% with state funds a couple of years ago, and so this funding is kind of lapsed in that particular program, and we're asking that to be moved to routine maintenance also. So you see the additional $9 million total for routine maintenance, and that will go towards funding our service contracts. As we've had to become a more effective organization, we're having to do things with the private sector, and we're doing a lot of things like our I-95 maintenance contract. This year we rolled out an I-75 comprehensive maintenance contract from the Cobb County to Tennessee state line, where we turned it over to the private company to manage and maintain that to our standards, and it's going very well. We talked about the increase in motor fuel, a little over $26 million. We're asking that to come into our program. $16 million coming into routine maintenance again because we're doing more of these service contracts. And then payments to CERTA, that's an increase of about $10 million. And that will go to fund the Georgia Transportation Infrastructure Bank. we move over to our state general funds program. And last year, you were kind enough to work with us to consolidate these programs from our intermodal program into one program. We had FTA, FAA, and FRA programs that were out there. And we were struggling with matching some of our federal grants because the money was in 3 different pots and trying to get it across. And last year, you've done that to allow us to consolidate and combine those programs, and that's been very successful for us this year. We weren't asked to make any reductions this year, as the governor mentioned, so you'll see that our adjusted budget stays the same. Just for a reminder, a lot of people ask us each year, airport aid match is now 90% federal, 5% state, 5% local for our airport improvements. And then we also we receive about $35 million in airport aid each year. I'm going to jump back on that purple dot again. You don't need to move back, but the capital program. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Our federal program, as you know, Congress is voting today, as a matter of fact, for an extension for a couple of days. And then we're hoping to see a budget that get us through 2014 for our federal program. But you need to know in 2014, that we've only received about $300 million of our $1.2 million in federal dollars through the fiscal year. So definitely a challenge for us from a cash flow process this year. I think we're confident that we're going to get a bill that will get us through the end of this federal fiscal year, which will be September 30th. But it's something that we're having to watch very closely. 2015 budget is the governor's recommendation, and his estimate for motor fuel collections is $1,005 million, as you see up here. Pretty much the same distributions as we've had in the past. GO bond debt service, about $156 million. SRTA payments to State Road Toll Authority, $91 million. Our routine maintenance number is about $194 million. General operations, $166 million. The match for our capital programs and capital maintenance programs, the state match is $273 million. And then the local maintenance improvement grant program is about $122 million. And I kind of jumped over that in the 14 budget. It was $122 million last year. It's staying at $122 million this year in the budget recommendation, which is about 12%. And statutorily, that's got to be somewhere between 10 and 20%. It's traditionally been about 11. It went to 12 last year, and it'll be 12 again this year in the recommendation. As you can see, though, our debt service, our total debt service is roughly, for 15, will be $167 million in state general funds. I'm actually getting that number a little bit wrong, but it's a little over, make sure I get that number actually. $167 million is correct. It makes up about 24% of our state motor fuel collection. So about 24% of our money is going to the debt service. 2015 budget recommendations. Again, this is about $20 million over the base projections for 2014. So working with the governor's budget recommendations, the money has been recommended to be distributed the following way. You see compensation initiatives, a little over $1.7 million. Again, a reduction in operating expenses for local road admin, as we talked about earlier. That's about $752,000 reduction. An increased service agreements amount, we've added about another $9.7 million to our routine maintenance activities. And then again, in 2015, another transfer of about $9 million to the Georgia Transportation Infrastructure Bank. That's very much in line with what happened in 2014. The redistribution in 2015 recommendations is again around a little over $8 million. Again, to transfer about $5.7 million out of local road admin, transfer that again to maintenance. Local road and administration, about $1.5 million moved to construction administration, which is where those bodies were moved to, as I mentioned to you earlier. And then in the planning number, again, the $1.5 million, since we're not going to do matches to the MPOs, would also be moved to maintenance. And that's an area that we just have to focus on. If we're going to do it with the private sector and enter into these agreements, we've got to have these routine maintenance contracts funded. On the state general fund side and the intermodal programs, again, there was no request for reductions. So you'll see the same numbers with a $56,000 increase based on for the actual, we call it the governor's recommendation for the, what do we actually, the $56 million towards compensation initiatives and retention initiatives that the governor's added to the budget. That wraps up our 2015 Chairman's. I kind of stop at that point, and I've got a couple other things I need to talk about, but I want to see if there's any questions at that point. No questions this time?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. people in my neighborhood in Atlanta are really excited about the new interchange at 85 and 400.
Correct.
But what they really ask me about is, when are we going to get some relief from the congestion? I mean, why aren't we developing plans for transit? And I look at this budget, I don't see that anybody in your department is focused on transit.
Well, our FTA grant program, obviously, as you know, in Atlanta, MARTA is a direct recipient for the transit funds.
Okay.
They come straight to MARTA in Atlanta. We manage the rural programs and the urban programs and outside of Metro Atlanta. So for FTA, our role is very small, as you know, in that. But as an agency committed to transportation, we are certainly wanting to move transportation forward and getting some mode shift to transit.
Of course, it's not just Atlanta, it's the region
Correct.
that needs some relief. So
Correct. Yes.
I wish you would think
Certainly.
more seriously.
Certainly. I don't know if you know, of course, Atlanta Regional Commission does the planning for Metro Atlanta, as you know, and we're very engaged in that process and developing the plan. They've rolled out their $59 billion plan this past week for comments and other things. And obviously, it's a very ambitious plan, but it's something we partner with Atlanta Regional Commission on a regular basis. And I think that our board members, and many of them are very committed to doing what we can with transit. But as you know, State Motor Fuel is dedicated roads and bridges. So.
Commissioner, I don't see another question.
Okay, a couple of areas I need to hit on I want to make sure you're aware of, and this might generate some discussion. So, of course, the TIA, we want to make sure the board is in the legislature and everyone's very comfortable with what's going on in the Transportation Investment Act. That program has been in place for 1 year now. Collections are down a little below what the forecast was by the state economists, but the program is going very well. The states are, the counties that are in those regions that are benefiting from their 25% match. I think things are going very well, and some of the products we're rolling out, and the program's going pretty well. We're going to make some cuts on that particular in the future, potentially working with some of the regions if the funds don't start up, but right now we're in good shape. We want to make sure you're well aware of that. Last year, you also were kind enough to work with us. We amended in about $8 million into capital construction last year to do what we call quick response projects. And we did these quick response projects to really show you, and I think we're trying to make a business case that we've got to separate ourselves from the federal program. And you amended this money in last year around April to bring in about $8 million. And since then, we've launched 127 projects around the state. Many of these are already open to traffic. Right after you amended the money in, if you're not tied to federal dollars, you can do a lot very expeditiously and oftentimes, more effectively. And we want to be in a very effective organization. And we're going to continue to try to make that case that we've got to uncouple ourselves or unchain ourselves from federal program. And I'm going to get to that a little bit more, but there's a couple of slides here of the things we're doing around the state. These are things where we just go in and using our assets, doing something very quickly, and we can make a big difference in moving traffic through intersections. Sometimes you don't need to widen the road to 4 lanes. You just need to fix some critical intersections, and you can make a huge difference. And we have about 127 of these projects underway since you were kind enough last year. So we always want to drive home the fact that we are a very effective organization, and we continue to make the case that we continue to consistently have the best maintained roads in the country. We're consistently doing things on a shoestring budget, but you'll see in this particular thing, just looking at our southeastern state comparisons, our per capita investment in transportation is low. We're one of the lowest gasoline taxes in the country, and in fact, our 19.3 cents is really only 16.3 cents comes to the Department of Transportation. As you know, 1% goes into the general fund. I think we're being a very effective organization, and we're very proud of the staff at our DOT. And if nothing else you leave today, though, I really need to drive this fact home here at the end of this presentation today. And that's the federal program and what's going on in Washington. We have some huge challenges ahead of the Department of Transportation. I mentioned that in 2014, the dollars are coming in very slow. I like to use the example, a simple example. If a project's $1 million, we award a contract to a contractor for $1 million. The treasurer sets aside $200,000 in state funds. We get an IOU from the federal government. We are a totally different program than most states. We don't get a block grant or our dollars. We're a reimbursable program. So we have to complete the work and submit a request to be reimbursed from Federal Highway Administration. Totally different. So it's going to create some huge challenges for us going into 2015. What you need to understand, so cash flowing a project, if a contractor was awarded a project for $1 million, She's got $200 million in her bank account, or $200,000 to pay a contractor. He sends us in an invoice. He doesn't care what the color of the money is, whether it's a federal. He just wants to get paid. And she's got to figure out how to pay him the full amount while she's waiting on this federal reimbursement. Right now, they're not reimbursing us, so it's slowing down some of our programs. We think we'll be in good shape. But 2015, we've got something, and all the states are facing with this, what everyone's referred to as the fiscal cliff for the Highway Trust Fund. And you need to understand what goes on with the Highway Trust Fund. The Highway Trust Fund is in a sense, going to be insolvent in the federal fiscal year 2015, starting this October. MAP 21 was a 2-year transportation bill that got passed, and of course, Congress kicked things down past the elections and stuff. But we're coming up, that it expires this September. There's so much uncertainty about what they're going to do it. And so I want to hit the next slide a little bit. It kind of shows, here's what's going on. They've been basically borrowing money from the general fund to prop up the Highway Trust Fund to keep it at the same funding levels. And that's not something that's going to be as sustainable as we know with our current Congress and the current mood of what's going on in the country and stuff. So right now in 2015, coming up the next fiscal, if Congress wanted to keep it at the same funding levels we have today, they would have to infuse $12 to $15 billion from the general fund in to keep it at the same funding levels. That's one option that they're looking at, they'd have to do. And of course, you also know that they'd have to find that in their budget some other where to make up that difference. And so we're not comfortable that that's going to happen. We don't know what's going to happen. The other option is out there that it would take about a 10-cent increase in the federal gas tax to meet that number. Pretty sure that's not going to happen in that scenario. And then the third option is that they can just spend what's coming into the Highway Trust Fund. And that's a possible scenario. So I think it's my duty to make sure you're aware of all those scenarios. If that third scenario happens, though, we have to make some adjustments to our program, because what that means is in federal year 15, which starts next October, even if they had a bill that only looked at the monies coming into the trust fund, we would be challenged because there would be no real federal authorizations done in that fiscal year. Next chart probably shows that better. This is not my chart. This has been going around the country. Federal fiscal year 2015, that's the fiscal cliff. What does that mean to Georgia DOT? It really means that we would not be able to let projects moving forward for basically the bulk of the fiscal, our state fiscal year 15. So traditionally what happens today is we will have used all of our federal obligation authority for our Highway Trust Fund by probably June of this year. So we'll be done spending all of our federal dollars. When we roll into our state budget year, we would use the motor fuel dollars that you've given us. We would start advanced constructing these projects. It's a method that they allow to be done. And when the federal fiscal year comes in, you cash in your chip to get reimbursed. I can't guarantee you today that there's going to be any chip to cash it in on. So we're going to be probably in the months of July, August, and September of this year, we will not be able to let any construction projects. We will not be able to authorize any new right-of-way acquisitions, and we will not be able to start any new design until such time as the federal program has some clarity of what's going to happen. Not knowing what the options are. We just, as a state that can't go into debt when we enter into an agreement in our contract, we have to pretty much take that risk management strategy. So Josh has been tracking what's going on at the federal level. It's today, they've met for the first meeting yesterday. We've been meeting with our U.S. congressmen on a regular basis. I hate to say that, that's September to them. It's not impacting them because they don't have to worry about it till September. But for us, it's going to impact our program really starting in a couple of months. And it's going to hurt our highway construction industry. It's going to hurt our citizens who are not going to have projects moving forward. And we're really moving into the bulk of construction season as you move into those things. That's the time when you really want to get the work out and get the contractors going, because it's the spring and summer, summer, fall months. So we've got some huge challenges in front of us with the uncertainty of the program, but you need to know that that's out there. We don't have a way to cross that gap and make that, until we see some clarity. We can't take the risk of going into debt with dollars we don't have. So you need to be aware of that challenge, and we want to make sure, if nothing else today, that you knew that that's sort of on our horizon for fiscal year 2015. The last slide. Yeah, let's, maybe end on a positive note. Our fatalities continue to go down. We had over 1,750 fatalities 7 years ago. We're leading the nation. We were probably looking at our 7th or 8th year in a row in terms of decrease in fatalities. That's something that's very positive for the Department of Transportation. It's one of our #1 goals is safety. And I guess we just, on the last slide, we want to make that connection. I think we failed a lot of times during the Transportation Investment Act and some of the other votes and stuff to make that connection that transportation is the driving force behind a strong economy. And we've got to make investments in transportation if we want to continue to grow jobs in Georgia. And we want to work with y'all to make that happen. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. See, we've got a question or two here. Questions for the Commissioner? You even got an old DOT board member or two sitting out there, and they ain't come up with a question between the two of them. You know.
I gave them some easy ones. Now, come on. It's good to be the last one of the day, is that?
We sprung one up here. I think it's Representative Burns.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, you did. Mr. Commissioner, I just want to thank y'all for, I'm familiar with one of your projects down on Georgia 17, and just to say that's good use of the public's money for a safety project that really is beneficial and makes that roadway safer. It's a very busy stretch of highway. Question, and two, working with you guys on offering assistance on economic development projects that helps especially rural Georgia attract industry and do it safely. So we appreciate y'all's input on those lines too. But explain to me a little bit about the districts the areas that passed T-Splosh.
Yes, sir.
Where you're seeing a shortcoming. How are you going to overcome that, and what strategies are you going to use to deliver what we promised in those areas?
Right. So, as we said, many of these are the number that was below the forecasted number, and of course, many of those regions are already seeing a downturn in their sales numbers anyway. Their actual sales tax numbers. So, today, most of the projects we've seen, the ones we've actually let and awarded, they've come in below the original estimate. So that's helping a little bit offset some of the costs. We actually have a program manager on staff with us, working with us about looking at our future projections. And there's probably 2 or 3 different things you can do in each region will be a little different. There's 3 regions that passed it. I think that the most important thing that we're going to see is that, if we hold the 2011 numbers and don't really build in some of the increases in terms of what we saw in revenue forecast for increased cost, and keep it at 2011 numbers, we may be able to do some things in that nature. We'll be working very closely with the region. To date we have 115. Well, we have 47 DOT projects are let to contracts so far. 41 resurfacing, 4 blended projects, 2 GDOT projects. We've worked with local governments to deliver about 115 projects to date. So right now the program is very successful. It's 1 year. Is it too early to panic? It's probably not. But we will have to make some adjustments because you can never collect that revenue that's already gone. So.
Yeah, you're on. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. Point of information, can you give us a status of the Fall Line Freeway and funding is in place for that, correct?
Sure. I've got our planning director and our chief engineer here. If you want to take that? Its last piece is actually.
Thank you, Representative Epps. Yeah, that last piece is actually under construction, making that connection over by Milledgeville and over by the river. So they're actively under construction. So that completes that eastern half from Macon over to the east. So that's good news. That's really brings that corridor to fruition, and then people can start enjoying it and have that freight moving along the corridor.
Other questions? Senator Underman.
Thank you. I'm over here.
Senator.
Hi. Could you just explain that flow-through money with CERTA? I saw where there was some payback and some. Do you make payments and what
Sure.
Could you just explain that process
Sure.
and what it's for?
Sure. The payments to the State Road Toll Authority in general are made. They sold the GARB bonds and sold some of the GO bonds and GRB bonds, and so they manage that for us since we can't have bonds, and so those are payments that are taken straight off the top that go to pay the previous debt service.
You mentioned your debt service. Altogether, the debt service that y'all are paying totals how much?
This year it'll be $401 million, including our federal debt service, which is the Garvey portion, our GO and our GRB.
400, okay.
GO is around $172 million. GRB.
Okay.
Yeah,
I was thinking that figure for GO bonds was was 70 million or so higher than that at one time, like 250 at one time.
Yes, it's total debt. State motor fuel is about the number you're hitting on, yes.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right, sir. Don't see any other questions. We never could pull one out of the other former DOT member from the Senate, so I guess he'll have his questions later on tomorrow. Huh? His time's coming. Commissioner, we appreciate it very much, what y'all doing. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Got OPB on the way, so y'all hold with us. we're gonna let Chief of Staff Riley speak first, and then he's gonna introduce OPB. Hey. Okay.
I got a question for
Okay. All right, ladies and gentlemen, if y'all, I know you're trying to get a little of that highway money before it gets out the door, so we got some high-ranking DOT board members in here too, so y'all get your licks in while you can. But we've got
Seriously, okay.
OPB director with us, and Ms. McCartney, we appreciate very much you staying so late today. I know you probably don't get to stay late very many days, so we're just glad to give you this opportunity. But we're glad to have you today and appreciate your time and the hard work on the governor's, both of his budgets, and we're looking forward to your words of wisdom and advice for us.
Well, I'm glad I haven't changed from last year, that I'm really good at clearing a room. So that's so it was full for Keith, and then when I walk up here, everyone leaves. But really, just thank you, and again, just really want to compliment both Chairman England and Hill, and also wanted to take an opportunity to thank Martha and Melody, and that it really is a joy to work with the House and Senate budget offices, and we really look forward to the continued cooperation and trying to get to the absolute best budget possible. I thought I would take a little bit of a different approach, because you've heard a lot of numbers. You've heard the governor probably at Eggs and Issues, the State of the State, and in his joint hearing. So I thought I would not really talk about numbers, but I'm really actually going off of a great presentation that Terry England did back at Fiscal Managers Conference. He's probably getting very worried right about now. Representative England.
Oh, in my defense, that was all Martha's idea.
Yes, he did a great job at Fiscal Managers, talking to all of the fiscal budget officers in the state and really explaining the budget and the health of the budget, and made a lot of great analogies. He did, though, include some great pictures of the governor, of me, superimposed our faces on some great bodies and stuff. And so I think he's a little stressed right now to see if he's really in this PowerPoint. So he'll just have to wait and see. But taking off of that, a little bit of a different approach. We want to kind of explain aspirin versus vitamin, which probably sounds odd to everybody, but really the aspirin is medication that you really use to reduce pain. It's for immediate results, versus a vitamin is really looking at that long-term well-being health. And that's the comparison I'm going to make today on the state budget. That really the budgeting concept that we've been utilizing and we will continue to utilize is really two approaches. And really back when we went into that Great Recession back in 2008, probably that first year, 2 years, it was really that aspirin approach of being very reactive, looking at decisions made in response of actual projected revenue, because I don't think anyone really understood the impact that and the cliff that we were going to go off. But even during that time, and what the Governor Deal has done a phenomenal job on, is really a vitamin approach of looking at how to maintain a balanced budget, that the decisions that we make today will absolutely have a positive impact on Georgia and Georgia citizens. And every decision that we make along with the General Assembly, that's our end goal, that it needs to have that positive long-term impact. Some things that we look at of being proactive is really that long-term health of our pension plans. You hear a lot about pensions, and that's critical to always be able to fund pensions regardless of revenue, because we want to be able to maintain that AAA. In addition to that is that collaborative effort that we mentioned earlier of really working very closely with all of you as legislators in the House and Senate Budget Office to really be able to shape policy that ultimately benefits Georgia's. Told you I was going to be quick. The last slide, Terry will escape. I knew he thought I was going to do something in here, so now he really doesn't know when I'm going to get him back. But really, it's looking at that balanced approach of building that foundation to prevent future illnesses, building for that long-term economic health, which means that, and you heard the governor talk about this throughout the day, of really investing in education and developing that very strong workforce that drives the economic development in the state. It's about that strategic planning and developing the partnerships. I listened to some of the presentations throughout the day, and I heard a couple questions come up. I think one, there was a lot of questions probably around the pay raise, so I thought I would take an opportunity just kind of explain the thoughts around that we did include a lump sum within agencies' budgets, and this was, the thought behind that was to be able to provide agency heads flexibility. It is not across the board COLAs, that it's really for that agency head to look at providing if it's based on merit, performance, or if that agency head really has more issues with retention, being able to address retention and recruitment areas. So in addition to that pot of money, we did do some targeted salary increases in the budget, and that was really focused around DOC and DJJ, around those entry-level correctional officers. We did make a salary adjustment to the feed and meat inspectors at Department of Ag, and again, that was based on very high turnover. We made some slight increases around Department of Law and also around banking and finance, but I know that was, a few questions came up today, so just wanted to briefly talk about the different approach that we used in the budget. That's it. I will open up for questions.
When I saw that last picture of the fruits and all that, I was thinking, is she fixing to start talking about the fruits and nuts walking around the Capitol? But but you didn't. So. Questions for OPB director?
I can end today with no questions. That would be great.
I think that the chairman may have a question.
Madam Director, it's come to my attention that you've taken a good bit of personal interest in visiting state assets and properties across the state this year, and I appreciate that, and I think all Georgians do. I think you've gone as far as retrieving samples from the marsh with DNR and EPD. You fought forest fires, which I'm jealous on a D9. I've asked for that, and I hadn't got to drive one with the Forestry Commission. I've driven a few of the new Chargers to make sure that they're operationally complete and do what they need to do for high-speed chases on the road course down at Forsyth, and actually accompanied a SWAT team with a pistol and a rifle, which that would be interesting to see. I've watched some bald eagles with DNR and some sea turtle restoration missions with them as well, and ensured that the DPS infrared camera, the FLIR systems, were working correctly on the Bell 407 helicopters. I think I did get to join you on that evening, and watched the night raid there. And even completed an immersion tour at Hays State Prison. That would have been interesting to have seen as well. Is basically what I'm getting at, is this information correct, or has the governor's chief of staff errantly informed me of this?
You know, I would emphasize that that is absolutely accurate information, and I would assume that you and Senator Hill would want the OPB director traveling around the state to really understand the wonderful assets that we have and to be able to see all of the great work that our state employees are doing, so we can better make decisions working very closely with the governor.
Next question.
Hey, I'm done.
Okay, on a serious note, anybody else got any questions for the OPB director? Well, it's been a good day for the state and for the legislature, and definitely for the governor, and we look forward to the process over the next weeks and a successful conclusion of all this, and let's get continue the state moving in the right direction. Thank you so much, Teresa. Appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, I think that concludes our afternoon. We thank you for your attention.